The following clip is presented to you by The Extreme Life of Matt Hardy, available every Friday wherever you get your podcasts and at extremehardy.com. I do want to talk about this incident. I don't want to speak vaguely here in vague terms or anything. You know, what you're referring to is that there was a social media spat between yourself and the Jim Cornette camp. I want to off the top say I've never interacted with Jim Cornette in my life. I have no knowledge of him personally, so it's not really a conversation for any interjection from me. But I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it all stemmed from a tweet that someone sent you basically asking for other people to recognize the elite and the quality of pro wrestlers and people that they are, and you echoed those sentiments. Is that correct?
But also too, that is where it started. But also, it goes much further back than that, because Jim hasn't been a fan of the Young Bucks or Kenny or Hangman Page or Orange Cassidy. I mean, there are several people. There's a laundry list you can name at AEW, right? And obviously, the Bucks are two of my best friends in the world. I've gotten to know Kenny really well over these last couple of years that I've worked with him at AEW. I like him a lot. I knew Hangman. Our second episode was on Hangman. Isn't that right? It was number two.
Yep, number two.
Our second episode was by Hangman, and he was here grinding and coming up in the independents in the Carolina and Mid-Atlantic area. And that's when I first got to know him. And I booked him on Omega shows, and Shane Helms booked him on Omega shows, and we did all we could to like help him out and support him. So the fact that Cornette constantly like needles me because these guys are my friends or whatever. And then there was a conversation where he said, at one point, he said, I always get along great with him. And I had a great respect for him. He's got a great mind for the wrestling business. I understand why people enjoy his podcast. He's a very charismatic, entertaining guy. He is gifted with the gift of the gab. He has a golden tongue, right? He's gifted with that. And I understand why people like him. I understand why people are drawn to him. And he is like one of those cult leader people. And he draws in people just like that. The Cornette cult is quite the appropriate name for his followers, I guess. So the fact that I always got along good with him, and I respected him, and I considered him a friend, and I thought he did things to help me in the beginning of my career. He did. He booked me at Smoky Mountain. He pushed for us at WWE. He did the same thing with Chris Jericho. He brought Chris Jericho to Smoky Mountain and booked him there. And there was a point where he said, because Matt Hardy and AEW did football fuckery, which is what he called the Stadium Stampede, which, keep in mind, we were doing this like 6 to 8 weeks inside a once-in-a-century pandemic. You know, like a pandemic that just, it rarely ever happens in life, in existence, you know, and we don't know what the fuck is going on as far as like how contagious this stuff is and everything else. And we're there still trying to make, you know, the television show as good as possible every single week. So the people that are sitting at home, they can't leave their homes, have something to escape, you know, from reality for just 2 hours, you know, AEW programming. And we took a lot of pride in that. And we were down there. We did that Stadium Stampede over the course of the night before, and they edited it all morning, you know, and they worked on it. But Jim Cornette had the audacity to say, because Matt Hardy and Chris Jericho were involved in the Stadium Stampede match, I can no longer be their friends. Interesting. I can no longer be their friends because they're in a wrestling match. I'm their friend, and I like them as human beings, and I thought they both had potential, and I wanted to see them excel and do well in pro wrestling. But now, because they're doing a pro wrestling match that isn't my cup of tea, I can no longer be friends with them. I mean, is this real life? Who says that? Who thinks like that? At the end of the day, pro wrestling is entertainment, and it's just dumb pro wrestling, especially if you're in the business. You know, just what it comes down to, Jim Cornette has got a shtick to do. Right now, he's not a hot commodity. You know, no one is looking for him right now to be a booker in their promotion or whatever else. And I'm sure he wants to be home. I'm sure he wants to be retired. And he does have a successful podcast, but his whole shtick His whole bit is going in there and hate watching AEW and saying all the negative things he can to feed all his cult of Cornette followers this dissension and this hatred and this negativity that they can slurp up like zombies. That's what he does, and that's how he makes his money now. But the fact that he was willing to just throw away relationships with myself and with Chris Jericho because we were in the Stadium Stampede match, a match that wasn't his cup of tea. I mean, that is just asinine. It is mind-blowing to me. And that says a lot more about him than it does about me or Chris.